The key sat in my palm like a small brass apology. Old, cold, too light for the weight it carried. Margaret Ashcroft had vanished into the rain, and the dark sedan had followed her into the alley. For a second, I thought about chasing them. That was the kind of thing a younger man does when he still believes speed can make up for ignorance. I was no longer young, and ignorance in Greyford was usually fatal. I stayed where I was, engine running, eyes on the alley mouth. No scream came out of it, no gunshot, no woman stumbling back into the street with blood on her gloves. Just rain, streetlight, the low growl of the city pretending it had seen nothing. I looked at the key again. The blue room. Those 3 words had followed Arthur Bell for 30 years. They had sat inside Martin Kessler's memory like a splinter, waited inside Margaret's mouth like a confession, and now they were sitting in my hand like an invitation. "Do not go to my house," she had said, "but people in trouble rarely tell you where not to go, unless that is exactly where the answer is." I pulled away from the curb, not toward Windsor Hill. Not yet. There was one man still living who had seen Arthur Bell's Packard on the night it crossed Briar Bridge. If I went to the Blue Room first, I would be walking into an old murder with new eyes, but no witness. I needed Daniel Price. The south side of Greyford looked different after midnight. In daylight, it was all machine shops, tire yards, lunch counters, and men carrying their exhaustion in metal pails. At night, it became a place of shuttered windows and yellow bulbs, where every alley seemed to have a memory leaning in it. Price and Son Auto Repair sat behind a gas station that had given up being respectable sometime during the Eisenhower years. The sign over the garage had lost 2 letters, so it read, Price and So Auto Repair. That felt honest enough. There was a light on inside. I parked across the street and watched for a minute. The rain made the windshield soft and blurry. Somewhere behind the garage, a radio played low, then clicked off. A man stepped into view. He was in his 60s, thick through the shoulders, with white hair combed straight back and a mechanic's rag in one hand. He locked the side door, turned, and stopped when he saw me crossing the street. "Garage is closed," he said. "Daniel Price?" His eyes narrowed. "Who's asking?" "Walter Hayes." That did not make him relax. In Greyford, my name had a way of opening doors or making people check the locks. Daniel Price did the second. "I don't need a detective," he said. Arthur Bell did. The rain filled the silence between us. Price looked older all at once. "Arthur Bell's dead. That's what I keep hearing. You got no business bringing that name here. Somebody brought it to me first." I took out the photograph from under my coat, the one of Margaret's house, the one with the words on the back. "Ask her about Thomas." I held it out. Price did not take it, but he looked at it long enough. "You should leave," he said. "I will, after you tell me what you saw on Briar Road in 1954. His jaw tightened. "I told the police." "No, Mr. Price, you told a reporter. Then Samuel Voss came to see you, and suddenly you told the police nothing." The name hit him like a hand across the face. He looked up and down the street. "Come inside." The garage smelled of oil, dust, and old fear. Price turned on a single hanging bulb over a workbench. Its light swung slightly, making the shadows breathe. He pulled a bottle from a drawer, poured himself a drink in a coffee cup, and did not offer me one. "I was 16, he said. My father owned the station on Briar Road. I worked nights because he said sleep was for men with money. What time did you see the car? Little after 11. Arthur Bell's Packard. Yes. Who was driving? Price stared into the cup. Samuel Voss. I did not move. I did not speak. There are moments in an investigation when a name stops being a name and becomes a door. Voss had just opened. You're sure? I asked. I've had 30 years to be sure. Where was Arthur? Passenger seat. Alive? Price shook his head slowly. No. You saw that from the station? I saw enough. His head was tilted wrong. Not asleep. Not drunk. Wrong. Was anyone else in the car? Price swallowed. Thomas Bell was in the back. Arthur's younger brother. The man who disappeared after the funeral. What was Thomas doing? Crying. That answer was so quiet I almost missed it. Crying? Price nodded. Not like a drunk. Not like a man scared of cops. Like a man who had seen the end of his own life and knew it was still breathing. What happened after they passed? I called Martin Kessler the next morning. I was stupid enough to think a newspaper could beat men like Voss. And then Voss came. With Thomas. What did Thomas say? Price looked at the wall. He said I had to forget the car. Did he threaten you? No. Voss did. With what? My father. Said stations burn all the time. Said boys run into trouble on dark roads. Said memory was a dangerous habit. And Thomas? Price's hand tightened around the cup. Thomas slipped me a note when Voss wasn't looking. Do you still have it? He gave me a look. You think I kept a murder note in my sock drawer for 30 years? In this city, I've seen stranger. Price went to an old metal cabinet, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a tobacco tin. From inside it, he took a folded piece of paper so fragile it looked like breath could ruin it. He handed it to me. The note was short. If anything happens to me, Arthur died in the Blue Room. Voss killed him. Margaret knows where the papers are. I read it twice, then a third time. What happened to Thomas? I asked. Price took the note back, as if the paper itself were a wounded thing. He came to see me 3 nights later, said he was leaving Greyford before Voss made him disappear. Did he say where? No. Did you ever see him again? No. Did you believe he got out? Price looked at me for a long time. No. The garage settled around us. Outside, tires hissed over wet pavement. I turned toward the window. A dark sedan rolled past the garage slowly. Too slowly. Price saw it too. His face went pale. They're still watching, he whispered. Voss is old, I said. Old men watch because they can't run. That old man buried Arthur Bell. Then tonight he can start digging. Price stared at me like he wanted to believe that and hated me for making him try. Mr. Price, I said, I need you to do something. No. You haven't heard what it is. I know what it is. You want me to talk. You already are. To you, not to police, not in court. Then talk to a dead man. That stopped him. I took Martin Kessler's envelope from my coat and showed him the ledger page. Kessler kept this for 30 years. Arthur Bell wrote these names down before he died. Voss, Pike, Margaret, Briar Road Development. Authorization required before Monday. Price looked at the page. His eyes moved over it like a man recognizing a body. Briar Road, he said. You know it? My father's station was there. So were 3 boarding houses, a church, and half a block of shops. After Bell died, they bought everything, tore it down, built warehouses, made a fortune. Arthur refused to sign. Arthur Bell was a cold man, Price said, but he wasn't dirty, not like them. I folded the ledger page. Then help me prove it. Price looked toward the dark street. The sedan was gone, but fear never needs to park. Finally, he said, "What do you want me to do?" "Call Evelyn Marsh at the Herald. Tell her Walter Hayes sent you. Tell her to find Lieutenant Brenner and give him your statement. Police buried this once. Different police. Same city. Maybe. But 30 years is a long time. Some men die. Some retire. Some get tired of carrying other men's sins." Price gave a humorless laugh. "You always talk like that?" "Only when I'm trying not to get shot." He looked at me for another second. Then he nodded. I left him with the note, Kessler's name, and enough fear to keep him honest. Then I drove to Windsor Hill. The Bell House stood at the top of the hill like it had grown there out of money and silence. White walls, tall windows, iron gate. A place built by men who wanted the city to look up at them and remember its manners. No lights burned in the front windows. The gate was unlocked. That was never a good sign. I parked half a block away and walked up through the rain. The front door opened before I knocked. Margaret Ashcroft stood inside, still in her dark coat, still wearing her gloves. Her face was composed, but her eyes had the raw look of someone who had spent 30 years not sleeping properly. "You came," she said. "You gave me a key. I told you not to come here. I'm bad with mixed messages." She stepped aside. The house smelled of polished wood, old flowers, and the kind of money that had stopped enjoying itself decades ago. "Were you followed?" she asked. "Almost certainly." That made her close her eyes. I should never have sent the letter. "So it was you?" "Yes." "Why now?" Margaret walked into the hallway, and I followed. "Because Martin Kessler is dying," she said. "Because Samuel Voss came to see me last week. Because he asked about the Blue Room. What does he think is there? The same thing he has feared for 30 years. Proof." She looked back at me. "Arthur's proof." We climbed the staircase slowly. Portraits watched us from the walls. Men with serious eyes. Women with pearl throats. A whole family trained to look innocent in oil paint. At the end of the second-floor hall was a door painted a deep, faded blue. Margaret stopped before it. "For 30 years, she said, "I kept this room locked. Why? Because opening it would mean admitting I never left." I took out the brass key. It fit. The lock turned with a dry click. The blue room was smaller than I expected. Not a bedroom, not a nursery, a study. The walls were covered in faded blue paper, darkened by time and smoke. There was a writing desk near the window, a leather chair, a liquor cabinet, and a fireplace with a marble mantel. Above it hung a painting of Briar Bridge, done in winter, the river black beneath it. Everything had been preserved too carefully, not cleaned, not lived in. Preserved, a museum for one night. "This was Arthur's private room," Margaret said. "He worked here, read here, hid here, and died here." Her gloved hands folded together. "Yes." The word was small, but it landed hard. I walked to the fireplace. There was a faint mark on the wooden floor near the desk, darker than the rest, almost invisible unless a man was looking for ghosts. "Tell me," I said. Margaret stood in the doorway, as if entering the room too fully might trap her in 1954. "Arthur had discovered the fraud," she said. "Conrad Pike had been moving money through shell companies connected to Briar Road development. Samuel Voss prepared the contracts. They needed Arthur's signature to transfer the land before Monday. And Arthur refused. He refused. More than that, he planned to go to the district attorney. With proof." She nodded toward the desk. "He kept ledgers, letters, copies of everything. Arthur trusted paper more than people. A wise man in Greyford." Her mouth trembled, almost a smile, but not quite. "That night, Voss came here with Pike. Thomas was already here. He had gambling debts. Voss knew it, used it, made Thomas believe prison was waiting for him unless he helped persuade Arthur. Persuade him to sign. Yes. What about you?" I was downstairs. "Listening?" "At first, no. Then they began shouting." She looked at the floor. "Arthur told them he would rather burn the company down than let them steal the city street by street. Pike said men like Arthur were sentimental only when they were already rich. Voss told Arthur to sign." "And Arthur?" He laughed. Rain ticked against the window. "That was Arthur's worst habit," she said. "He laughed when other men wanted to feel dangerous." "What happened then?" "Voss struck him." "With what?" Margaret pointed to the desk. A bronze horse stood on it, frozen mid-gallop, one hoof lifted, dark with age. "Arthur bought that in Paris," she said. "He hated horses. I never understood why he kept it. I picked it up with my handkerchief. It was heavy, heavy enough." "Arthur fell against the desk," Margaret said. "Then to the floor. There was blood. Too much blood. Thomas screamed. Pike panicked. Voss did not. Voss staged the accident. He said Arthur's death could ruin all of us, or save all of us. He told Thomas that if anyone spoke, the police would hear that Thomas had killed his brother over debts. He told me no jury would believe a wife who had signed half the household accounts without reading them. Did you believe him?" "I was 32 years old, Mr. Hayes. My husband was dead on the floor. My brother-in-law was sobbing. Conrad Pike was vomiting into a wastebasket, and Samuel Voss was already explaining the future. That was the thing about men like Voss. Some people witness murder. Some people organize the room around it." "They put Arthur in the car," I said. "Yes." "Voss drove." "Yes." "Thomas was in the back." "Yes." "And Pike?" "He followed in another car." "Where did they take the body?" "Briar Bridge." The answer hung in the room as if it had always lived there. "Then they pushed the Packard into the river," I said. "Voss said water would take care of what fire could not." "And the papers?" "Arthur had hidden them before they arrived. In this room." Margaret turned toward the painting above the fireplace, behind Briar Bridge. I reached up and lifted the painting from the wall. Behind it was a small iron safe. The brass key had not been for the room. It had been for the safe. I looked at Margaret. She nodded. I put the key in, turned it. The safe opened. Inside were envelopes, ledgers, carbon copies, 2 property deeds, a bank record, and a handwritten statement sealed in an envelope marked, "For Thomas, if courage finds him." I opened it. Arthur Bell's handwriting again. Careful, firm. alive in a way his body had not been for 30 years. The statement laid out everything: the stolen money, the forged transfers, Pike's shell companies, Voss's legal work, the pressure on Thomas. Arthur had known they were coming that night. That was why he wrote the letter. Not to me, not originally, to anyone honest enough to open the safe. At the bottom was one final line: "If I die before this reaches daylight, Samuel Voss will have done what he has threatened to do. There are accusations, and then there are graves with handwriting." I folded the paper and put it back. "Why didn't you take this to the police?" I asked. Margaret did not defend herself quickly. That made her answer worse. "Because the morning after Arthur died, Thomas disappeared. And Voss told you he had him." She nodded. "He sent me Thomas's ring." "Only the ring?" "And a note. It said silence keeps him breathing." "Was Thomas alive?" Margaret's eyes filled, but she did not cry. "I don't know." I looked back into the safe. There was one more envelope at the bottom, newer than the others. My name was on it: Mr. Walter Hayes. The same careful blue ink as the envelope that had reached my office. "You copied Arthur's letter and sent it to me," I said. "I sent the original," she said. "I kept this for you in case I lost courage." "Why me?" "Martin Kessler said if Greyford ever needed a man stubborn enough to walk into a locked room with a dead man waiting, it would be you." That sounds like Kessler. Half compliment, half diagnosis. A noise came from downstairs. Not loud, a door closing. Margaret turned pale. I put the papers back into the safe and shut it, but I kept Arthur's statement in my coat. "Were you expecting anyone?" I asked. "No." Footsteps moved in the hallway below. Slow, confident. A voice called up from the bottom of the stairs. "Margaret." The voice was old, but not weak. Margaret whispered, "Voss." I took the bronze horse from the desk and handed it to her. She stared at it. "No," I said. "Not to use. To remember you survived the first time." Then I moved behind the open door. Samuel Voss appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a dark overcoat and a black hat, both wet with rain. He was thin, elegant, and ancient in the way knives are ancient. His face looked carved rather than aged. Two men stood behind him. The same kind of men every city keeps in supply. Big coats, empty faces, hands near their pockets. Voss looked into the blue room and smiled. "Margaret," he said, "you always did have a talent for choosing the worst possible hour." She stood beside the desk, holding the bronze horse at her side. "You followed me. I've looked after you for 30 years. "No," she said. "You watched me." A distinction without value. Voss stepped into the room. He looked around with something close to nostalgia. "The room hasn't changed." "Neither have you," Margaret said. That seemed to please him. Age changes the body, not the necessities. His eyes moved to the painting, then to the safe. The smile thinned. "You opened it." Margaret did not answer. Voss sighed. "You should have let the dead stay useful." I stayed behind the door, breathing slowly. One of Voss's men remained in the hall. The other came into the room and moved toward the window. "Where are the papers?" Voss asked. Margaret lifted her chin. "Gone." Voss looked almost disappointed. "Margaret, lying never suited you. Even when we were young, you wore guilt too visibly. You killed Arthur." "No," Voss said. "Arthur killed himself the moment he mistook morality for strategy." "That is not an answer." It is the only answer that matters. He removed his gloves slowly. Arthur was going to destroy everything. The company, the land deal, Pike, Thomas, you, himself. He had no gift for compromise. So you struck him. I corrected a problem. Margaret's hand tightened around the bronze horse. With that, she said. Voss glanced at it. For the first time, the old man's face shifted. Not fear, annoyance. You kept it? I kept everything. You should not have. No, I said from behind the door, but I'm glad she did. Voss turned. His men reached for their guns. I already had mine out. Hands where I can see them, I said. The man near the window froze. The man in the hall did not. He went for his coat. A gunshot cracked through the blue room. Not mine. The man in the hall dropped to one knee, clutching his shoulder. Behind him, at the top of the stairs, Daniel Price stood holding a revolver in both hands, his face white and furious. I told you I hate talking to police, he said. Didn't say I wouldn't bring them. Heavy footsteps thundered below. Lieutenant Brenner's voice came up the stairs. Greyford police, weapons down. For once in its miserable life, Greyford had arrived on time. The second man dropped his gun. Voss did not move. He looked at me, then at Daniel Price, then back to Margaret. You think this ends anything? He said. It ends Arthur Bell's case, I said. Arthur Bell is dust. Dust has a way of getting into records. Brenner came into the room with two uniformed officers behind him. He was a broad man with tired eyes and a coat that had seen too many winters. He looked at the gun on the floor, the man bleeding in the hall, Margaret with the bronze horse, and me standing by the door. Then he looked at Voss. Samuel Voss, Brenner said. That's a name I never thought I'd get to put in handcuffs. Voss smiled faintly. You still may not. I took Arthur's statement from my coat. You will. Brenner read the first page. His expression changed before he reached the bottom. Then Margaret spoke. I will testify. Voss turned toward her sharply. No, you won't. Yes, she said. I will. You are an accomplice. I know. You will ruin your name. My name was ruined the night I let him be buried as a drunk. That landed harder than any bullet. Voss looked at her for a long second. Then he laughed softly. You always were sentimental. No, Margaret said. I was afraid. There is a difference. Daniel Price stepped into the room. I'll testify too. Voss looked at him. For the first time, something like recognition crossed his face. The station boy, he said. The station boy got old. A pity. Not for Arthur. Brenner nodded to the officers. They took Voss by the arms. He did not resist. Men like Samuel Voss never believe the law is real until it is holding their wrists. As they turned him toward the door, Margaret said, What happened to Thomas? Voss stopped. The room stopped with him. For 30 years, that question had been living under the floorboards of every room in that house. Voss looked back at her. Thomas ran. No, she said. He ran because he was weak. No. Voss smiled. He came to my office the next morning. He wanted to confess. He wanted to save his soul. And you killed him, I said. Voss looked at me. Mr. Hayes, you have a crude imagination. Then improve it. Voss was silent. Brenner stepped closer. Where is Thomas Bell? For a moment, I thought Voss would carry it to his grave. Then the old man gave a small, tired shrug. Briar Road made a fine foundation. Margaret made a sound I had never heard from another human being. Not a scream, not a sob. Something between a door breaking and a prayer dying. Daniel Price lowered his head. Brenner's face hardened. "Take him." This time, when the officers led Samuel Voss away, the old man looked smaller. Not sorry. Never that. But smaller. Sometimes justice does not make men repent. Sometimes it only removes the room they used to stand in. By morning, Briar Road was full of police lights. The warehouses had stood there for decades, brick and steel and profit stacked on top of silence. Brenner got a warrant before sunrise. By noon, workers were breaking concrete near the northeast foundation of the old Pike storage building. They found Thomas Bell before dusk, a skeleton in the dirt, a signet ring missing from one hand, a cracked skull, and a bullet lodged in the spine. Margaret did not go to watch. Daniel Price did. So did I. Not because I wanted to see another dead man pulled out of Greyford soil, but because someone had to stand there and know his name. Thomas Bell had not been a murderer. He had been weak, frightened, used. In most cities, that might have been enough to survive. In Greyford, weakness was something men like Voss could smell through walls. The newspapers took over after that. Evelyn Marsh made sure the Herald did not hide behind soft words this time. Martin Kessler's old notes were printed beside the new evidence. Arthur Bell's statement ran across the front page under a headline that made the whole city stop over breakfast. Arthur Bell did not die in accident 30 years late. Still true. Conrad Pike was dead and beyond the reach of handcuffs, but not beyond disgrace. His company records were seized. His name came down from 2 buildings before the week was out. Samuel Voss lived long enough to be indicted. That was more mercy than he deserved. Margaret Ashcroft confessed to her part in the cover-up. The district attorney wanted a clean villain and did not quite know what to do with a guilty woman who had spent 30 years punishing herself more thoroughly than the court could. In the end, she gave testimony. Full testimony. Names, dates, money, the car, the bridge, the blue room. She did not ask for forgiveness. That made some people more willing to give it. A few days later, I went back to St. Agnes' home. Martin Kessler was awake, which seemed to disappoint the nurse. I put the Herald on his blanket. He looked at the headline for a long time. Then he smiled. It was not a happy smile. Reporters do not smile happily when the truth arrives 30 years late. They smile like a man hearing a train after he has already walked home. "You got him," Kessler said. "Arthur did most of the work. Dead men are underrated. So are stubborn reporters." He coughed, and this time the cough took something from him. When it passed, he touched the newspaper with one thin finger. "Thomas?" "Found." Kessler closed his eyes. "Poor boy." "Yeah." "Margaret?" "She'll testify." "Good." He opened his eyes again. "What about Voss?" "In custody." Kessler smiled faintly. "I hope the cell is cold. I'll mention it to Brenner." I stood to leave. At the door, Kessler said, "Walter." I turned. "Did Arthur's letter really come to you?" "Yes." "After 30 years?" "After 30 years." Kessler looked toward the window, where daylight sat pale on the glass. "Then maybe the dead aren't late," he said. "Maybe the living are slow." I had no answer for that, so I let him keep it. 2 weeks later, Arthur Bell's grave was opened. Not for spectacle, not for ceremony, for correction. The medical examiner found what the river and the first coroner had hidden badly: a fracture at the back of the skull that did not match the crash, no water in the lungs. Arthur Bell had been dead before the Packard ever touched Briar Bridge. The official record was changed. Accidental death became homicide. It was only a word, but words matter when they are carved into stone. Margaret paid for a new marker. Arthur Bell, 1901 to 1954, beloved husband. The truth returned. Thomas Bell was buried beside him. No grand phrase, no lie about peace, just his name. Thomas Bell, 1911 to 1954. Sometimes that is all the dead ask from us, to stop being missing. On the last evening of the case, I went to Briar Bridge. The rain had finally passed, leaving the road slick and shining under the lamps. The river below moved black and patient, as if it had always known the truth and had simply waited for the rest of us to catch up. I stood by the railing where Arthur Bell's car had gone through 30 years earlier. For a long time, the city made no sound. Then a car passed behind me. I did not turn. This one did not slow. No dark sedan, no watchers, no old men hiding behind money, just a tired engine heading home. I took Arthur's copied letter from my coat, the one Margaret had sent me, the one that started the whole thing. If this letter reaches anyone, then I did not die the way they said I did. He had been right. Not soon enough, but right. I folded the letter and placed it back in my pocket. Some cases begin with a body. Some begin with a scream. This one began with a dead man asking, politely and 30 years too late, not to be forgotten. In Greyford, that was almost a miracle. I walked back to my car. The city watched me go, quiet as ever. But this time, it was not hiding a secret. It was burying one properly.